K does not need permission to exist from anyone.
There are no solutions, only trade-offs. This is how Ryo justifies Arisu's suffering. Instead of working with her to prevent catastrophe, Ryo's hubris shapes itself into the exact same weapon that she tried so hard to stop. I can't save everyone. Therefore, I will sacrifice one person to protect everyone else. Arisu is that sacrifice. Someone who wants nothing but good, but is one day destined to destroy the world. A result of her robotic programming. Is it foolish to save everyone? Arisu and Ryo's conflict is sparked from that question. This is a story about refusing trade-offs, deciding your own fate, breaking the cycle of abuse, and choosing heroism beyond everything. Unfortunately, despite how deep these themes are, the story itself is far from perfect. Volume 2 is a mixed bag, but that might be more fascinating than if it were merely just good. Blue Archive takes place in Kivotos, a city run by student councils. Millennium Science School is the setting of Volume 2, a deeply important setting that's known for its strong sense of technology and for its student council president, Ryo. It's a fitting setting for this point of the story, as the school's straightforward nature prevents any need for deep explanation. This is a huge strength for a game like Blue Archive, which is so heavily character-focused. Just because Volume 2 requires less world building, however, that doesn't mean that it can be ignored. The story recognizes this, so it puts a lot of its time into letting you meet each student within the school. On paper, this is fine, but it becomes a problem if it leads to an underbaked main cast. The Game Development Department, or GDD, are the main 4 characters of Volume 2. They're all incredibly important, as Arisu's arc could only work if we believed that her friends would fight for her. Unfortunately, Volume 2 struggles to do this. Meanwhile, they all get time to shine in their spin-off manga. In the game, Yuzu hardly shows up, while Midori serves merely as a straight man. In the manga, the story recognizes both the good and bad of Midori's seriousness and Yuzu's anxieties. These moments allow for their trust in Arisu to feel earned. Momoi is the lone exception, being excellent in both the game and the manga. She is loud and reckless, but most importantly, she is extremely passionate. Having a character like this is important, when Yuzu and Midori are so quick to doubt their own abilities. Momoi truly feels like the soul of this group, someone who would defend its heart at all costs. Arisu's identity is the primary thing that Volume 2 has to establish. Once the GDD awakens her from the ruins, she becomes the focal point of the story. Her personality is infectiously endearing. She's someone with a boundless curiosity and sincerity, held back by her lack of social experience or emotional fluency. So basically autism. A recurring motif of Volume 2 involves Momoi teaching her to speak in video game terminology. The idea leads to a ton of good jokes, and yet these gaming concepts also help shape her philosophy, an incredibly clever blend of irony and sincerity. Arisu is wonderful, but I have my problems with how her mystery gets treated by the narrative. Much of the story is spent gathering information on her. This is where we get introduced to the engineering department and Veritas. These scenes fail to connect to the thematic core, coming off solely as exposition. The problem isn't that they exist, as their hacking and engineering skills become very important in the final fight. It's just that they aren't used well. This is because it isn't until the second half of the story that we're given a reason to fear Arisu the way that Ryo does. Because of this, these scenes lack tension, and everyone is left with the exact same opinion of her. However, there is one character who patches up this hole perfectly. Neru is the leader of Cleaning and Clearing, a group of maids who act as Ryo's foot soldiers. She is introduced solely as an obstacle to our protagonist's goal, and this section of the story is very boring. Unfortunately, CNC suffers from the exact same issues as everyone else. But then something interesting happens. Neru becomes my favorite character. She has by far the best chemistry with Arisu. Neru may be the single strongest student in Millennium, but she sucks at video games, and is extremely embarrassed about it. Of course, Arisu pulls absolutely no punches either. She's brutal in the sweetest way imaginable. This is the single funniest part of the story, but there's also a lot of nuances that push these interactions beyond their comedic roots. It's clear that something set a spark in Neru after her fight with Arisu. Given her strength, it's rare for her to feel challenged in such a way, thus why she attempts to bridge the gap through video games. Through doing this, she befriends someone who can knock her down a peg, something that she clearly craves. Their chemistry is formed through rivalry, a bond deepened through a desire to become the best that you possibly can. While initially scared of her, Arisu learns to value this relationship to the same extent. Because they chose to set their fear aside to be vulnerable, they gained trust in one another. Without trust, no one would have fought for her. While that trust doesn't feel earned with most of the cast, it absolutely does with Neru, the reason why the second half is as strong as it is. Does Ryo have a point? This is the question that we are forced to address once Arisu goes rogue. In a close fight, Momoi ends up getting knocked unconscious, while Ryo uses this as a chance to capture Arisu. This is when the twist is revealed. Arisu was created to destroy Kibotos. Suddenly, Ryo's point must be confronted honestly. Unless Arisu's programming could be fought, saving her could result in the end of Kibotos. Ryo had run the calculations and determined that it would be impossible. As a result, every character is on edge about what to do. But then Momoi awakens from her coma. Despite being the victim in this situation, Momoi doesn't blame Arisu for something that she can't control. So what if she's the Demon Lord? Unlike Ryo, I actually know her. Logic? Why should we think of that? What matters is that it would be a grave moral wrong for Ryo to get away with this. They don't need a plan. What they need most is for someone to take action. Arisu may have become the heart of the group, but Momoi is still the soul. I love this scene because of how well it uses her personality. Yes, she may be silly and comedic, but she's passionate and earnest, not just about games, but also about the friends she's made along the way. Ryo may not be cruel in motivation, but her hubris is cruel in practice. This is the fatal flaw in her philosophy. There's a scene where Ryo talks to Neru. In it, she states that she knew Neru would betray her. She says this without fully understanding why that is. Neru, unlike Ryo, took the time to learn about Arisu. I can understand why Ryo wouldn't. If you've convinced yourself that you have to detain someone, seeing the humanity in them would make that action harder to perform. If she took any time to get to know her, however, she would know that Arisu would do anything in her power to overcome her programming. This is exactly why she doesn't fight back. She lets herself get kidnapped because she's been gaslit into thinking that she's a terrible person. Ryo doesn't see this as manipulation, but rather as proof that she's right. Unsurprisingly, Arisu isn't the only person who's harmed by Ryo's hubris. Toki is the secret 5th member of CNC, and Ryo's personal bodyguard. For the sake of Ryo's protection, Toki's been isolated from the rest of her club, forced only to interact with Seminar and the Super Phenomenon Task Force. She is an incredibly strong character, stronger than even Neru. More important than her strength, however, is her loneliness. A standout scene is in the epilogue, where Toki struggles to connect with her fellow CNC members. It does such a good job at showcasing that Ryo's actions have lasting consequences on these characters. However, I have a glaring issue with how Ryo's character is treated, and it has to do with Sensei. Sensei is a character that is defined by his refusal to give up on his students. Even when they cause severe harm, he doesn't choose sides. This is why his lack of presence in Volume 2 throws such a massive wrench into the narrative. Ryo is not evil or corrupt like the adults around her. She's overwhelmed, misguided, and confused. She's faced with the impossible decision of either protecting her school or seeing it perish. That is an absurd responsibility to place onto a teenager, one that gives reason to every choice she makes. Because of this, her goals are sympathetic. Ryo spends the story forcing Sensei to choose her over Arisu. The potential for conflict is clear and strong, given how powerfully Sensei rejects this idea. Instead of reprimanding her, however, Sensei should do what he does best. He should share her burden. Instead, he has her carry it alone. Sensei never gets the chance to let Ryo cry on his shoulders. When the story ends with her running away, it leads to an ending that puts Sensei out of character. Volume 2 does a great job at exploring why Ryo needs to change. The ending, however, doesn't let her. This is my single biggest problem with the story, one that Volume F miraculously manages to salvage. Arisu is constantly told what her purpose is: a weapon, a demon lord, an apocalypse seconds within reach. That is the verbal abuse that Ryo espouses toward her. That trauma easily could have warped her, but the thing that saved her was being able to find trust in the people who care about her. Meanwhile, Ryo refused to listen to Himari, Neru, or anyone else. This is the fundamental difference between them, and yet Ryo's words still clearly leave an impact on her. Arisu may have forged her own path, but she did so at a cost. When faced with her biggest challenge yet, Arisu has to make a choice that will shock everyone.
Okay, please let me apologize to you. I rejected you. I turned you away because I did not understand you. I wanted to run away from this thing I did not understand. I was so afraid of you. That was not an excuse to turn you away. Even if I was afraid, even if I could not understand, I should have faced you like this. I do not know you, Kay, but I thought about how I would feel if I were in your shoes. If Kay's purpose is to be the key that leads to the destruction of the world, you must bear much pain and loneliness all on your own. I then realized Kay must have been suffering all along. Sensei told me I am allowed to decide what the purpose of my existence is. Kay can be what Kay wants to be. Kay does not need permission to exist from anyone. That is why I like the name Kay. It is a name that came to be just because of a mispronunciation. Like my name, Arisu. There is no reason, meaning, or purpose behind Kay. I do not know if I am able to save anyone. I am only an apprentice hero, but I have learned that the desire to save someone is all that is needed to become a hero.
Arisu may be robotic, but she grew to have such a beautiful understanding of humanity. Her realization may be simple, but even simple things don't come easily. Because of Ryo's words, Arisu's convinced herself to fear Kei, a fear that would last even after being saved by her friends. But the lesson that Arisu learned isn't one that she should apply only to herself. Kei deserves the same kindness that she received, kindness that then gets extended to Ryo. Since Ryo is trying to atone through helping everyone, there is no need for vengeance or apologies. There's no better sign than any that Arisu has overcome her trauma than to be able to forgive and move on from such an event. She is a character who resonates deeply with me. I wasn't really joking with the autism correlation. For someone so odd to get told that her very existence is wrong is something that really couldn't cut any deeper. I deeply admire her. Something that we both struggle with is making choices under pressure. This is the first time that her sincerity isn't overrun by fear. That's when her simple, yet meaningful act of kindness becomes one of the story's most poignant moments. Ryo is shaken. Having been lambasted by Himari for her actions, she believed that she deserved nothing more than for her very own victim to lash out in the same way. However, Ryo doesn't need to be defined by her mistakes, the same way that Arisu and Kei didn't need to be defined by their purpose. Through her growth, Arisu had become the heroic ideal that she had looked up to in her favorite video games. Volume F ends Arisu's character arc on a bittersweet note, where she finally gets to be the hero, but at the cost of her own existence. Kei, refusing to accept this, chooses to be sacrificed in place of Arisu. For a story about refusing trade-offs, seeing Arisu's tears hits exceptionally hard. But Arisu isn't willing to accept this sacrifice. Rather recently, Kei finally became playable with the release of additional story content. Truly, it's the embodiment of everything Arisu had ever worked for. Blue Archive Volume 2 is a mess. The poor pacing, the inconsistent character writing, and the overemphasis on world building all serve to dampen the themes that it tries to explore. The execution may not be pretty, but Volume 2 is an extraordinarily thought-provoking story. The pacing is poor, but the best moments are absolutely worth it. Most characters are poorly utilized, but the best are incredibly well written. World building is overemphasized, but Kivotos is a genuinely interesting world. Above all, Volume 2 is a story about breaking the cycle of abuse and choosing heroism beyond everything. Ryo believes that there are only trade-offs. Arisu refuses to accept that premise, and that refusal is what makes her a hero.